Welcome again to the Three Guys Analyze podcast. I'm your host, Matt. Joining us on the line are Rick and Tony. Guys, so it looks like we have a bigger week this week. Last week, the college football scene was pretty barren. This week, we got some big games. And midweek, we even got a nice surprise. We have the college football rankings. So we're going to start right away with those. Tony, we'll start with you. And before you give your grand opinion of all things Minnesota on these, let me read out the top 10. So at number 1 was Ohio State. Number 2 was LSU. Number 3 was Alabama. Coming in at number 4 is a shock to some was Penn State, especially Ricky. Clemson at number 5. Georgia at number 6. Oregon at number 7. Utah at number 8. Oklahoma at number 9. And a 2-loss team, Florida, at number 10. Tony, what's your first takeaway from the college football rankings?
First take was how the committee is definitely showing that Clemson has played an awful schedule to this point, and that that close win against UNC, where they probably should have lost, is definitely coming back to haunt them a little bit. Now, granted, when you look at the top 4, you have OSU, Penn State. They'll end up playing each other. LSU, Alabama play each other, obviously, this week. So there's a couple, like you could say, playoff quarterfinals, if you will. I think it's interesting to see that Georgia is actually the first one-loss team. I currently think they have the worst loss, and I think they should have probably been dropped down a couple spots. I think one surprising note that I took from that is the fact that there was group of 5 schools ranked this week. I think that's a testament that they actually had more, that there was more AAC teams ranked than there were Pac-12 or Big 12 schools.
Yeah, there's a lot to look at that in terms of the Pac-12. Rick, I know. Let's start first. Penn State at number 4. What are your feelings about that?
Well, can I give my overall thoughts on the playoff rankings here? Because I've got some breakdown to do.
Okay, let's start with that.
Yeah, so here's how I look at this, right? So this is always a psychology exercise every year as to what the college football playoff committee is thinking. So the way I look at this is by conference, right? So I think the clear message here is the SEC is going to get 2 schools in this playoff. I said it in the last podcast that I thought it was going to be Georgia and Alabama, but I think if you go through and look, it's interesting that the top 1-loss team is an SEC school. The top 2 2-loss teams, okay, are both SEC schools, and all 3 of those schools are ranked above a undefeated Baylor from the Big 12 and an undefeated Minnesota from the Big 10. So what that tells me is the committee is heavily favoring the SEC compared to any other conference. And I think the most interesting thing to look out for after this week's slate of games is what happens to the loser of LSU Alabama, and how far do they drop in the rankings? Because as Tony said, Georgia's loss is not great, losing to South Carolina. However, even with that being said, they're still ranked 6th. So I would find it hard to believe that an LSU Alabama loser is going to drop anything below Georgia, therefore still remaining in that top 5 group of teams. So I think that was my biggest takeaway.
Not even dropping out of the top 4. Honestly, I can see LSU staying in at the 3 or 4 slot, and I can see Alabama maybe moving to 4 or 5.
So I think that depends on the game, right? Because what did we saw this when LSU Alabama met in the regular season and they met in the national title. What was the score of the regular season game? Wasn't it like 6-3 in overtime? I mean, it was the worst game between 1 and 2 I've ever seen. 9-6, yeah. So I think if it's a close game like that, Tony, I absolutely agree with you. I think if it's a blowout one way or the other, they may drop in the 5th, but I don't see them falling any farther than number 5. So that's my first thought. I think that it's interesting just how they rank the conferences. Obviously, the Big 10 and the SEC are the top 2 in the committee's mind, and I think there's little to no respect given to the Big 12 especially. I mean, their first team is number 9, Oklahoma, and Baylor, again, like I mentioned, was sitting at number 12, being undefeated. behind two lost teams is pretty telling. And then the Pac-12, they've got Oregon and Utah, but I still just don't know that those teams winning out is going to be enough to leapfrog any of the teams that are above them. So then you had a question, Matt, about Penn State. What sitting at number 4?
Yes, because you crushed Penn State last week. So I wanted to get your feelings on them being so high this week.
Well, I mean, it's a long season still. I think they're going to beat Minnesota. I know we're not to that point yet. But here, I don't think that Penn State against, let's see here, I would favor Clemson over them. I'd favor Georgia over them. I'd favor Oregon over them. I think Utah and Penn State, okay, maybe I'll give the edge to Penn State. But I would favor Oklahoma, Florida, and Auburn over them. So, it's fine. They're undefeated. They haven't given the committee a reason not to rank them in the top 4. But personally, I don't think any of us here think that they're going to finish the season making the playoffs. So,
no, I think you're right. When I saw these, I had a positive takeaway. I think when I look at this, I can see that the committee actually cares about who the teams have played and how they've looked playing them. Now, I probably would have put LSU over Ohio State just because LSU's beaten a couple better teams. But I know when they came out with them, they said Ohio State's dominated the teams they've played, and they've looked the best. And they have the number 2 defense and very high-scoring offense. Obviously, Penn State's undefeated, and they've played some decent teams. Clemson being at number 5, that felt really good to me because, look, they haven't played anyone, nearly lost to North Carolina. So I think this is a positive step for these rankings. Georgia, I'm still on the fence about them. I would like to see Oregon ranked higher than them. Now, I don't think they're ever going to do that because, Georgia did beat Oregon head-to-head, so I can understand it. But Utah being number 8 right behind Oregon, I think is pretty good. But like you said, there's a clear preference to the SEC teams. And just based on this, I still think there's a great chance that 2 SEC teams will get in it. But like Tony said, Cincinnati being 20, that's really big for Ohio State. And if they keep winning, I know they only won by a field goal against ECU last week. But that's still pretty big. Now, that's Ohio State's best team they've played so far. Well, I guess they played Wisconsin. And those teams being up there is good. Michigan being at 14 is good for Ohio State. But I just like it. It just seems like they're actually looking at who the teams played, and they're just not grandfathered in because they came out ranked number 1.
Good point. That is a good point. But I do think with the committee ranking Georgia at 6, I think that's that right there is more of a kind of basis of on name brand compared to putting a Pac-12 school up there. Or I guess Oklahoma did lose to the number 16 team in the ranking. So, I could even see them being higher than Georgia. Honestly, I could see it being Oregon, Utah 6, 7, Oklahoma 8, Georgia 9. But I definitely agree that there's definitely more SEC bias for sure. I think one of the more underrated schools on this list was the undefeated Baylor school. And also, I also believe, that Cincinnati, Memphis, I think they should also be a couple slots higher.
Yeah,
but I think what you're saying is everyone wants to focus on how bad their losses is. I think what the committee is saying with these rankings is we care more about who you've played and who you've beaten than we do about who you've lost to. Georgia, okay, you can say they have the worst loss of any of the one-loss schools at the top. They also have the best win of any of the one-loss schools.
Yes.
So it's clearly the message here is, which I think is a good message, right? Because this is what we want in college football. We want these non-conference schedules. It came out today that in 30, Ohio State and Georgia are going to play a home and home. But it's sending the message that, and I think partly this has to do with money. I really do, revenue. But go out and schedule top-tier talent because we as the committee care about more who you beat than we do when you lose. And so that's why Georgia's number 6 and Oregon's number 7. Oregon has the better loss, but who has Oregon beat? Number 25, Washington, that's their best win. I don't know what that does for you. And that was 25 at the time. I don't even know what Washington's. They're not even in the rankings, are they? So I don't really get the whole argument of Georgia has a bad loss. I mean, Oregon and Utah both haven't played anyone.
But then if you look at Oregon's also, besides the close wins against Washington State, I mean, it's also been a consistent, blowout after blowout after blowout. So I think that also stands to a testament of, they're also winning at a pace of a Clemson, but they have a loss. So
I mean, at the end of the day, Georgia's beat the number 11 team, the number 10 team in these rankings, the number 15 team in these rankings. So, and Oregon hasn't beaten a single team that's ranked right now. So I think that's what it's the argument's over at that point.
Now, this is something I'm thinking about. Alabama, they haven't played anyone, right? Can we agree on that?
Correct.
So
their best win is Texas A&M.
Right. So we all feel that Clemson should be ranked in the top 4 because they haven't played anyone. They nearly lost. So Alabama hasn't played anyone. So they're still getting up there solely based on reputation. If LSU beats Alabama okay. So, I mean, they've played some team. If LSU spanks Alabama by 2-3 scores, does Alabama deserve to be in like the top 10?
I don't think they deserve to be in the top 5. I mean, maybe in that 7-8 range. Because honestly, I mean, as of right now, Alabama's schedule, I mean, would you say it's on par with the Oregon? Honestly?
So I think Alabama's schedule is on par with Oregon. I think the difference is how they've looked in those games. I mean, Alabama hasn't had a close game to this point. They've played the last 2 without their star quarterback. I think, again, going back to Oregon, and I made this point in last week's pod, that they have quite a few games that, the Washington State, that does not look good being a 2-point game. They beat Washington by 4. They played Cal and only scored 17. Stanford, they only scored 21. I mean, I think there is a bit of, yes, Alabama's strength of schedule looks similar to what Oregon's are. I don't know what the numbers would tell you, but I think the eye test is also important for the committee, and Alabama's played that competition better than what Oregon has. I mean, Matt, to your point, I think if Alabama gets beat at home badly by LSU, then yeah, they deserve to drop out of the top 10 because they don't have the resume that a Georgia has to back up that one loss. So the second that you lose, I do agree they should drop.
I appreciate hearing that from you, Ricky.
I'm just saying if Alabama loses to LSU, they play Mississippi State, Western Carolina, and they'll play Auburn in the Iron Bowl. So
and that's not a given.
No, and who knows what Auburn's going to look like at the end of the year. So I'm just saying if they lose this game, I mean, are they going to have they don't play Georgia, they don't play Florida. So, I mean, how's their schedule going to compare? Just kind of something that came to my mind about that.
I like that point a lot, actually, though, because it's a testament that if Alabama loses, I don't believe they should be in the top 4, even if they win out. Because obviously, if they don't win this week, they won't play. I mean, as long as LSU keeps winning, they won't play in the SEC title game.
No, that's right. So they'll be sitting at home.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at LSU's schedule, I don't know that they're going, because they'd have to lose 2, right? Yeah. So I don't see their last 3 games are against Ole Miss, Arkansas, and Texas A&M. But I think that's a good point what you guys are making, and ultimately comes down to a loss for Alabama. I think it ends their season essentially. I think a loss for LSU, they can recover, because what I can see is a 1-loss LSU team making the playoff. I agree with you guys. I don't necessarily see a 1-loss Bama team making the playoff, and that's because, again, going back, LSU scheduled Texas, right? And I know that win looks less impressive now than it did at the time, but still,
they're making
Texas. They beat Florida, who Alabama unfortunately doesn't have the ability to play, and then they've already beaten Auburn. So, I mean, those 3 wins right there are hugely impressive compared to what any one other team can put on their resume.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm just thinking, like, we could say that, does the NCAA want 2 SEC teams in the college football playoff? Maybe from a monetary standpoint, but just looking at it from an outsider, I would say, if they had a Big Ten school in there, an SEC school in there, an ACC school in there, and let's say Oregon got in, I think that'd be pretty cool. The fourth corner situation. But I don't know. We'll see how it is and how it plays out. All right, so moving off from the college football rankings, and we'll get another one of these as the weeks progress. We'll definitely change next week. Let's look at 3 games coming up this week. Like we said, last week was pretty barren. This week, we got a couple here. Let's start off with Penn State, the undefeated Penn State at the undefeated Minnesota Golden Gophers. Penn State is a 6.5-point favorite at Minnesota. Tony, what were you looking for in this one?
I definitely, the biggest matchup here is going to be Minnesota's rushing offense versus Penn State's rush defense. It's amazing. Minnesota, actually, there was a stat that their offensive line is a combined 1,700 pounds. And I found that very interesting. And then I also see Penn State, who's number 3 total defense in the nation. I mean, they're 8th in sacks, great defense, actually haven't allowed a team to score more than 13 points this season. And I think the way Minnesota's upward trajectory has been all season, yeah, granted, they have played a very soft schedule because they played San Diego State and they played Fresno and they played Georgia Southern, and they were all, closer than what they should have been. But I think with the upward trajectory, I think now is like their prove it week. And I think that with the game being in Minneapolis, I think that works to their advantage for sure. I think that PJ Fleck row the boat effect has been just amazing for Minnesota, and this even started out last year. It's one of those things like you have this nice perky upstart and everybody's counting them out, and I think that's a PJ Fleck thing that he can play up this week, and I think that's going to give a little extra motivation to them. I do believe that Penn State's offense, however, I mean, they'll have the best player on the field in KJ Hamler. But I do think that Minnesota's 19th best defense in FBS is going to contain him a little bit. I think this is going to be a low-scoring game. And so I think that Minnesota not only covers, but, I mean, I think they definitely win. I think in like a 17-13 type score.
All right. Rick, any thoughts on the Minnesota-Penn State matchup?
I think they should get the overrated bowl, and someone should win an overrated trophy when someone prevails from this. But I don't know. I think Penn State's going to win. I would be interesting how we view Penn State had they lost that game to Pittsburgh earlier in the year that they definitely should have or could have lost. I haven't bought into Minnesota being good. I think the committee agrees with me with them being ranked 17. PJ Fleck's a great coach. I like him from his days at USC. Who did he coach for, Tony?
Western Michigan.
Thank you, Western Michigan. And I'll have to fire the person doing some stats and research for me for this. But no, I think Penn State's a better team. I think they'll win. 6.5 sounds right, being on the road. And I kind of wish game day was there this week. They missed an opportunity, I think, instead of going to boring old. Yeah. So.
Because, I mean, you think about it. LSU, Alabama, that's a game they could go to every single year. But, Minnesota, that Minneapolis atmosphere, how many times are you realistically going to be able to go there? I mean, this is the first time they've been 8-0 since 1960.
People are dying to go to Minnesota, too. Very in demand this time of year. A lot of tourists like to visit. It's supposed to be a blazing 43 degrees, partly cloudy skies on Saturday.
Oh, so you think it's a weather thing? You think Corso couldn't stand the cold? I like that angle.
Well, his face might fall off in that sort of cold weather. I'm looking at these last 5. So here we go. The last 5 Minnesota games, very difficult schedule. Purdue, Illinois, Nebraska, Rutgers, Maryland. If we look at Maryland, Rutgers, Nebraska, they have a combined 5 wins. And then Penn State's last
upward trajectory.
Penn State's last 5: Maryland, Purdue, Iowa, Michigan, Michigan State. So not very similar. Now they do share Purdue. Penn State beat Purdue 35-7, and Minnesota only beat Purdue 38-31. So if we're basing this on common opponents, I guess. But it's definitely true that Penn State has had a little bit more difficult schedule than Minnesota has. Now I will go to town for the Golden Gopher. The mascot of Minnesota is one of my favorite. He looks so happy all the time, and he's me looking real happy today. I'm not a big fan of the is it the Cougar? Is that what their mascot is? Penn State. Are they okay?
The Nittany Lion.
That's right, the Nittany Lion. Not a fan of that. Very basic, very bland. Doesn't hold a candle to the big tooth of the Gopher. All right, so moving on, and we're looking at the big game this week: LSU at Alabama. Bama is a 6-point favorite at home. Ricky, we'll start this one with you. What are you thinking here, LSU Alabama?
So I've got Bama in this game. I think this is a kind of perfect find out what you're made of game for LSU. I think Bama's got the pedigree, the players. They've been to the college football playoff for the last 4 years, been in the national title game the last 3. They've been there, done it on the biggest stage. I think LSU is kind of getting to that point. They think that they're ready to take that next step into being an actual contender, and this is kind of the game that either proves it or doesn't. But I don't know. I think Alabama is just tough to beat, especially at home. Tua's coming back. He's going to give them a lot of energy. I actually almost think that can work in their favor, the fact that he's been out the last few games. Sometimes you see that happen when they come back, and it's a jolt of energy to the whole team. And I would say I'd watch out if I were LSU, that if Alabama gets up by double digits early in the first half, I think it could turn into a blowout. Not that I think it will be.
I disagree with that because of the way
I think it can.
Disagree. Yeah.
Okay, let's hear your side of it.
Well, I look at it like this. I mean, LSU and the way that they have played. I mean, obviously, LSU has played the tougher schedule. Number one, and because of that tougher schedule, they have had to play in the fourth quarter, and they've had to play tough games, and they had to get down and dirty. And so, because of that, they're going to be able to show a little more resiliency than what I believe Alabama can take. Now, I don't think Tua is 100%. I don't. I think because he's not going to be 100%, that's going to stop some of his mobility a little bit. And because it's going to stop his mobility, I think that's going to limit him, and that's going to limit Alabama's offense to the point where, I mean, this is going to be points are going to be put up in this game. I'll tell you that. I mean, it's going to be close. LSU's going to cover. They're going to win. Just because of the fact that I think Joe Burrow is better than Tua Tagovailoa. I don't think we're talking – I 100% believe that this season Tua Tagovailoa is not as good as Joey Burrow.
Oh, my God. Okay.
That's a strong take, my man. A strong take.
And I think a lot of that is because we're not talking enough about the offense that Coach O has put together with Steve Erstmeyer and hiring Joe Brady from the New Orleans Saints. I don't think we're talking enough about that influence that he has had.
Well,
you have to watch Mitch Trubisky play football every Sunday, so I don't fault you for not knowing what a good quarterback looks like, but that's okay.
And you have room to talk, Baker Mayfield.
All right.
I do think an interesting stat about this game, though, that since 2008, so basically when Nick Saban started his run, only 4 teams have won at Denny Bryant Stadium. And of those wins, they have come by a combined 15 points. I think that's a telling stat right there, the way this game is going to be played.
Well, I can tell you this much. I just read online that Tua is still a game time decision per Nick Saban. So keeping it close to the vest like his partner in crime, Bill Belichick. I think the
Listen,
key
if Bama's being favored by 6.5 points, Vegas knows Tua's playing.
Yeah,
I guarantee you that.
I think
we all know Tua is playing.
Yeah.
If Tua doesn't play, I think that's going to be more of a shot. Because if Tua doesn't play, I think this could get ugly quick the other way. Because I think their offense is going to suffer without having an elite quarterback behind center.
For me, I think the big key in this game is Alabama's defense. If they let Burrow do what he wants to do, I think it's going to be a long game. But I think if they can stop Burrow and turn the ball over, I think Alabama is probably going to win. Now, Bama hasn't really played anyone yet this year. I don't know what sort of shape they're in when it comes to adversity. We've seen teams score on them, and then Alabama roll them for 40 straight. So if Tua's healthy, I would say they're hearing a lot of LSU talk right now, and I think that's highly motivating to them. Now,
but at the same time, it's not like, LSU's not hearing how they're inferior and they haven't won since 2011, and Alabama's done this and this and this, and all LSU has done is wander in the desert since then. And this is their prove it time, and I think that they have the stars have kind of aligned to the point where I think Alabama, for as great as they've been, I think this is one of those vulnerability games that they end up losing because of some sort of mishap. Especially, I can see this game turning on a Alabama mishap on special teams just because of how in years past how bad the kicking game is. And still, it still is. For as great as they are, how have they not found a kicker?
Yeah, that's a great
point.
But
here's the other thing, though, that the flip side of that is Alabama, I think this is the first time we've seen them be hungry and be a little bit playing with a chip on their shoulder in a while, given how that national title game ended last year.
I don't think they're the hungrier team.
What, than Alabama?
I think LSU's the hungrier team here.
Oh, I disagree. I think Alabama getting their butts kicked in the national title last year, and Tua having to hear all about how Trevor Lawrence is better than him, and Saban having to hear about how Clemson is the new team of the decade, and or the decade coming up, and that Bama is a bit overrated and washed up. I think there's a lot for Bama to play for that they didn't have to play for last year, and I have a think that Saban wants to show everyone this is the first real big challenge and big game that Saban has since that loss to Clemson in the national title last year to show the nation what Alabama's about. I think they're going to come out ready to play.
That same chip on the shoulder this game is such a mirror image of both teams because of the fact that I think then Coach O, and he has never beaten Bama. He wants to prove that his team is as good as people are saying they are. And I think he especially feels like he's got to play with a chip on his shoulder just because there's so many people out there that still don't believe he deserved the LSU job to begin with. And he needs that big quality win. I think he's gotten his team prepared very well for this game just by showing, like, the last time we seen LSU, it was when they played Auburn, and they had to come back and they had to play with some resiliency in that game in order to win that football game.
Uh-huh. Well, I'll tell you this much, that I really like the way Joey Burrow plays. He's got a swagger. He's playing with the chip on his shoulder. He got benched for Dwayne Haskins. I think he's got everything to prove, and Tua has nothing to prove, right? I can imagine that there has been talk in Tua's circle that, hey, I'm about to be the number 1 draft pick. Maybe I should tone it down a little bit. And this sort of injury situation is the last thing that he wants to deal with. We saw it with Nick Bosa last year. So I think he's not going to come back unless he's really healthy. But who knows? I think it's going to be a really fun game to watch. Hopefully it's not like a 6-3 rock fight. That would be tremendous.
Oh, I think both
Well,
offenses.
if you guys here's the thing. I don't know if you're looking at this, or you might know. So don't say the answer if you do know. But what do you guys think the over under is on this game?
What's 63 is what the over under is.
Matt, I just said if you knew, not to say it.
No, I didn't hear that part. I'm sorry, I just spoiled your fun.
Well, it's just the point of like, can you like just look at the shift in college football over the last 10 years. I mean, really, the game, everyone expected the last time these two, not the last time, but the last time that they were this highly ranked, that these two teams played, like that over-under number quite literally would have been 20 and everyone would have been okay with it. I mean, it's 63. Could you ever imagine that you'd have an LSU-Alabama game where the over-under is 63 points? That's crazy to me.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, it's more than the Penn State, Minnesota over-under 48. I mean, the Ohio State-Maryland line is 65, and that's where they expect Maryland to score 4 points, you know?
I was going to say, yeah. Why is this game at 3:30? That's the worst time for a primetime
the schedule makers? I actually read an article about that. It's because when CBS they have one choice of like when they want to do like an 8:00 game, and they chose Georgia Notre Dame over this game. And at the time when they had to choose the game, I can see why. They said Georgia Notre Dame. Notre Dame always brings the numbers. It's a high, at the time it was a top 10 matchup. And I mean, they still made the right call, but because of the fact that CBS has first rights, that's why the game's on at 3:30.
All right, so our third game, OSU versus Maryland. The spread is 43.5. Tony, will they cover? Yes or no?
It's going to be tough, but I think they cover 56-7.
Ricky, 43.5 points. Will Ohio State cover?
They'll cover because they're trying to get Justin Fields the Heisman, so they'll keep him in there throwing touchdown passes until the game's over.
I will say yes, too. Style points matter. They made that very clear. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for us today. Nice, quick, short one for you guys. Nice, quick listen on your daily commute. I'm Matt. We got Ricky on the line and Tony on the line. Final parting shots. Tony, anything to say for the fans?
Final parting shot. Lock of the week this week. Baylor -2.
All right. Ricky, last words for the audience.
Pay attention to Disney's Q3 earnings report that's coming out this evening. I think their stock's gonna soar tomorrow, so look at that if you can and get in while it's still low.
And I'll double down on that. Watch out. Disney Plus comes on air the 11th. Check out The Mandalorian. Sure to be fantastic. And that's been your podcast today, Three Guys Analyze. Thanks, everyone, for listening. And I hope you guys have a blessed day.